Welcome to this first session on the owner series. The owner series is the first session we're working with today, and I'd like to welcome you all. We've got lots of participants taking part, which is great. I'd like to thank you for joining us, and we have lots of owners taking part as well, which is fantastic. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this first session. So why are we running this owners series? As many of you will know, Boat International runs an owners club, of which our three guests today are members. One of the reasons the club was founded was to facilitate an information exchange between owners. So we're thrilled to be able to do that today with this live session. I hope all of the members watching and everybody else taking part finds this informative, but also hopefully entertaining. Introductions. Firstly, my name is Stewart Campbell. I'm the editor-in-chief of Boat International. I'm delighted to be here today hosting this session, which is part of our ongoing virtual boat show. If you haven't had a chance to visit the show, please do. There are over 100 yachts in the show, and you might even pick up a few buying tips from our guests here today. And that leads me on to this. In the early marketing of this event, we put it down as a buying and selling conversation. But after conversations with all our panelists, it became very quickly clear that it was too vast a subject to boil down into 45 minutes. So today, we will be focusing purely on buying super yachts, both new and used. We will be hosting another session on selling a little bit further down the track. So please keep an eye out for that. While I've got the chance, I'd like to say a very public thank you to Bruce Grossman, the owner of 54 Meter Forever One. Bruce was due to join us today, but unfortunately we had a few technical issues, so he wasn't able to. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. Today's session will be recorded and available later this week on demand, so don't worry if you have to leave early. Meanwhile, if you would like to tweet about the event, please use the hashtag #BoatOwners. Importantly, we'll have time at the end of the session to ask some questions. You're able to submit these questions throughout the session using the new Q&A box there. On the chat box in the bottom corner of your screen, click on that, and the team behind the scenes will filter your questions or moderate them and then push them through to us so I can ask our guests at the end of the session. If you're having trouble viewing the live session, please email events@boatinternationalmedia.com or message the team through the chat feature, and they'll pick it up for you and hopefully get you back in the session. We'll be running more live sessions over the next few months in the aim of sharing experience and tips from super yacht owners, and you can see them all here. Our next sessions will focus on charter, refit, and voyage. That's all about planning epic voyages in your yacht, which should be fascinating. And eventually selling, of course, we need to add that back into the schedule. We would love to hear from you if you would like to hear other topics discussed. You can email ideas directly to me. My email is on screen now. Additionally, if I can help introduce you or assist you in any way, please do reach out to me directly. Today, we're looking at buying, as I mentioned. So let's meet our experts. Up first, Irvin Laidlaw is the owner of 68-meter fedship Lady Christine. By my count, he has owned 40 yachts over the years. I'm sure he'll tell me if that's incorrect, both sail and power, and counts 11 yachts in his current fleet. A former World Super Yacht Awards judge.
We don't have the other man in the picture.
He is one of the most experienced super yacht owners out there, and we're delighted he's joining us here today. Peter de Savary is the owner of 30-meter super yacht barge Savary, built by Hagfort. He has bought and sold at least 30 yachts over the years, including some true legends. Charisma, once owned by Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and the Herreshoff Classic Vagrant, built for Harold Vanderbilt. He founded Pendennis and has owned over 16 shipyards throughout his career. Harry Vafias is the owner of 56-meter Benetti AE Cap d'Antibes and 47-meter Fedship X. He's famous for the rigor he puts into the buying process and has been known to visit 50 boats before making a purchase. Now in his early 40s, Harry has already owned 4 super yachts. Harry, I should point out, has only just landed 45 minutes ago in Mykonos, rushed to the boat. So, Harry, we're thrilled that you made it in time. It's great to have you here. The boat looks great.
Thank you.
Right, that's it from me. Without further ado, let's crack on with our experts. Irvin, I'm going to come to you with the first question. When you're buying a new boat, where does the search start, and how do you know you have found the right shipyard?
Well, there are a lot of people in this world who will know much more about which shipyard you should choose than you do. And the first thing I would say is that you should speak to as many owners, maritime lawyers, interior designers, exterior designers as you possibly can do. There are certain things, parameters that you need to set from the beginning, such as the size of yacht that you want. Most yards will say, well, we'll build any size, but actually you've got to look at the history and what they have experienced in. If you want a boat that's 60 meters, don't go to a yard that has traditionally built, say, 40-meter boats, because they are a different requirement. You need to gather as much information, particularly speak to owners who have boats built by that yard. They will then tell you their experience and whether the yard has stood up to their warranty claims, stood up to their cost the quotes, and have behaved well to the owner. So start with that. Talk to everyone.
Talk to everyone. And so you place a premium on human intelligence then in trying to find the right shipyard. Would that be fair to say? Very
much so. You can look at their financial, and that, of course, financial stability is incredibly important in a yard, but that's not enough in itself. You can easily be taken in by a balance sheet that looks strong, and yet yards have gone bust with balance sheets that may have looked strong at the start of the build. You have to remember, a build really takes 3 years for a big boat. And in my case, it was 4 years. And over that time, lots of bad things can happen to yards.
So it's key to make sure you're working. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to what Irvin said, is to decide on your naval architect. Choose a naval architect who has experience of the sort of size yacht, as Irvin says, and choose a naval architect with whom you believe you can have a good, close, reliable rapport, and ask him to assist you in selecting a yard, because the naval architects are objective. They have a wide experience, not just about design of the yacht, but also the construction of the yacht, the nature of the yacht. And a good naval architect, I think, is a key ally when you're deciding to design a new yacht.
Thank you. So human intelligence is key when buying new. Harry, when you're buying a brokerage boat, so where do you start on that journey? How do you know you're working with the right boat? How do you know you're going to get the right boat?
Okay, I have a bit of an advantage because, as you know, I'm in the shipping business and my family has been running ships since 1972. So we've been involved with ships and shipyards and maritime equipment and engines since I was a kid, basically. So this is, as you can understand, a bit of an advantage for me. However, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to like what you're doing, because you cannot rely 100% on third parties and just take their word for granted. You must be willing to go and inspect the boat yourself, be willing to maybe be present at the sea trials, have a very, very experienced surveyor when you do these sea trials, in order to be able to find out if the boat is indeed as described, without deficiencies, without being fit for the purpose you're buying the boat. And you won't find unexpected surprises after the delivery of the boat. So personally, I enjoy inspecting boats. I've inspected boats and in Europe and in the US. And I don't, as you know, I don't always do it to buy a boat. I just like inspecting boats of different yards, of different sizes and of different ages. And that's why today I have a boat which is relatively old, and I have a boat which is much younger, a Dutch boat and an Italian boat. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages.
Mm. It's interesting you said there about obviously nothing can replace the physical visit. And Irvin, when you've built boats with shipyards, you place a premium on actually visiting the place, seeing it for yourself, and meeting the people. Is that fair?
I think that building a boat, which is a very, very expensive hobby, should be fun and should be part of the overall ownership pleasure. So it's important to have a shipyard that you get on with, and important to realize that if you want to get the boat that is your boat, that has everything in it that you want, you have to dedicate a lot of time to do it. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts of appointing a project manager, however good, putting your captain in, because they'll end up building the boat that they think is great, not the boat that you think is great. So be prepared. I would say to anyone, be prepared to spend a lot of time at the yard, and with your designer, and with your both your exterior designer, your naval architect, and your interior designer. Time will be well repaid in the years following when you have a boat that fits your needs.
And Peter, do you place the same kind of premium on being there yourself, touching and feeling the tactility of the experience? You need to see the boat before you buy it and work with the shipyard?
I totally agree with Irvin. You've got to be very interested, very hands-on. It has to be a real relationship between you and the boat and those around you who are going to help you to build the boat and deliver the boat. But when I'm thinking of a second-hand boat, first thing I do is look at the latest edition of Boat International, read through that, and then I look at a number of back copies and just sort of get an overall feeling of what is out there in the market, what the pricing is, what type of boats there are. And it's usually a good place to begin. And I would always probably take my favorite broker with me when I am seriously thinking of buying a boat, because inevitably we sell these boats and we want to know what is the likely resale market. What's the boat worth? Is it going to be a hard boat to sell or an easy boat to sell? So I think before you buy the boat, it's always good to look at your exit at the same time as you're making an entry to purchase a boat.
So do you consider resale value when you're buying a boat, Irvin? So when you're commissioning a brand new boat, is resale a consideration?
If I considered that, I would never build a racing boat, would I? Because you use them for a couple of years and then you give them away. No, I can't say that I have. I think it's a very good point that Peter is making, because inevitably, particularly if you buy a second-hand boat, you will probably move on more quickly because it will not fit you perfectly. If you build a boat and it doesn't fit you perfectly, well, that's your fault. But a second-hand boat, I don't know what the average life is, probably 4 or 5 years. And therefore, considering the resale is a very, very good point.
Harry, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I mean, for knowledgeable yacht owners, even before you buy something, you pretty much know if it has a good resale value or if it's easy to sell or not. Obviously, if you try exotic yards that people don't know, because you want to buy something cheap, maybe sometimes selling the boat is quite difficult and you must find a really special buyer. Whereas if you buy a mainstream boat from a top yard, even if the interior might not be for everyone's liking, you know that you can pretty much sell it quite easily if, of course, the asking price is within a normal range.
So obviously when you're buying a brokerage boat, and obviously being there physically present is key to the process, what are the other things that you look for in a shipyard, Irvin, when you're working with them?
They have got to be open to your ideas. And in some cases, that can be very difficult, and you have to argue, you have to fight for doing things the way that you want to have done. A good yard will see this as a partnership and work with you rather than try to work against you. So that's one of the things. Peter, you look as if you've got ideas too on that.
Well, having owned a number of shipyards myself, I would say you need to satisfy yourself that the yard is not going to try to take advantage of you during the course of the build. So they may have priced the specification you've given them, But inevitably, along the way, you may want to make some changes to the yacht. You may decide that what you initially thought is now a little different, and you go to the yard and ask them to please make changes. When you ask a yard to make changes, they rub their hands with glee, and you need to have in the contract that the basis upon which they quoted to build the yacht, whatever their hourly rate was, their markup on materials, etc., is also applicable to any changes that you decide to make during the building of the yacht. Otherwise, you could find out that this yacht, to end up as you would like it to be, is very much more expensive. So I think you have to be very careful with the yard that you've got everything well nailed down.
Should you also beware the discount?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Should you also beware yards who are prepared to heavily discount, in your experience?
Yes, generally speaking, yards that have to heavily discount either have trouble with their cash flow, their liquidity, or they're short of work, and they've absolutely got to get work in almost at any price, and that's not a good sign. I think when you're buying a new boat, it's not a question of who's the cheapest yard. It's obviously got to be a fair and reasonable price, but I think, as Irvin rightly says, the stability of the yard in all respects is very important, and the relationship with the people that you're going to regularly interface with over several years, you have to make sure that there's a sort of camaraderie there, there's a good relationship between you and those individuals, and that you're quite satisfied they're not about to leave and take a job somewhere else. So stability of the yard in all respects is very, very important. But always remember, when the word change order ever is used, the yard rub their hands, usually with glee. So that would be at the owner's expense. So you've got to have that buttoned down. As shipyards, we always like to see as many change orders, as many variations as possible, because inevitably the profit margin is much higher on those unless the owner has pinned you down in the contract at the outset.
Thanks, Peter. And I just want to relate that question to the brokerage market as well. We obviously we watch the market very closely, and we see boats being heavily discounted all the time. Harry, when you're looking at a boat, would drastic price reductions on a boat that's been on the market a long time, would that scare you off buying that particular boat, or would you disregard that? And is the physical visit rule all when you're looking to buy?
No, I wouldn't be scared. There are some people that need to sell or have high leverage on a boat, and they need to sell. That doesn't mean that the boat is a bad boat. Not at all. Some cases, some heavily discounted boats that need to be sold have actually been pure gold for their buyers. If you remember, when I bought the Southern Cross 3, it was a heavily discounted boat. I bought it, I kept for 4 years, and I sold it and made quite a nice profit, which is quite rare, as my colleagues will say. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say just be very careful on the inspection, on the underwater inspection, and on the sea trials. If you do that, and you also check the history of the boat and the maintenance of the boat, I don't think you have many things to be scared of.
Good point. Irvin, just following up on that, you mentioned the other day in our conversations your experience of buying new boats. You haven't previously used a broker, and I found your comments really interesting because in hindsight, you actually think you should have done in some of your purchases. I just wonder if you could speak to that a little bit and relate that into the discussion.
It very much depends upon how experienced you are. I knew, partially by being a super yacht judge for many years and having gone around an awful lot of boats, I knew the yards that I wanted to deal with or didn't want to deal with. So using a broker is helpful to someone that doesn't know the yards, But I think, again, you might have to be careful, because a broker will have favorite yards that they want to go to, and you have to make sure that the broker is acting on your behalf and not on the behalf of the yard that's going to give him the biggest commission. On a second-hand boat, I would use a broker always, not anymore, and he should have some knowledge of certainly of the yard and possibly of the individual boat. He may well, a good broker will have a relationship with captains and can get information out of captains as to the problems the boat has had.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Sorry, you just glitched there for a little bit, but you're back. I think we got the point. Yeah, so obviously the broker knows the captains. Again, the premium on human intelligence is key. Peter, you always use the same broker, or mostly, I understand, and I think he's even watching. What advantage does that give you in the purchasing of the boats that you've had in your fleet over the years?
Well, I think two things. If the broker knows you, he knows your family, he knows your lifestyle. Everybody uses a boat in a different way. Some people like to be very private and just have their family on the boat. Other people like to entertain quite a lot. So the way you want to use your boat is very important. And if you have a broker who's also your friend, then your broker will understand how you intend to use the yacht. And that can be very helpful when you're looking at a yacht and talking about it. It's a soundboard, it's another check, it's someone who can make a valid point to you about this particular boat, and it's just helpful. If it's the selling broker is going to agree with everything you say, so you can't put any reliance necessarily on that. But if you have a broker who's your friend as well as your favorite broker, and you're both looking at the yacht together, and you look at all the ship's papers, you particularly read the log and see what problems the yacht may have had. You interrogate the captain, the chief engineer, etc. And as was earlier said, the broker probably knows a number of other captains, even previous captains of that yacht. So the due diligence you have to do can be helped by having the companionship of a broker that you like and trust and whose opinion you respect. And I think that's quite important.
And you said early on in your answer, the key consideration is how you want to use the boat. Oh, Savary is actually a really unique boat. I mean, how you use that boat perfectly exemplifies the type of boat it is. I mean, it's a great boat for cruising all over the inland waterways of Europe, but perhaps not enough thought is given in the initial buying process about how you want to use the boat. So, Harry, when you're buying a boat, does that factor? Obviously, that factored into your decisions around A, Captain T, but X, about how you wanted to use them. Is that fair?
Yes. Can I add something about the brokers first?
Of course.
It's quite important to understand, especially for the new buyers and the buyers that have not bought a boat before, that unfortunately there are very, very few yacht brokers that we consider completely honest and sincere. The broker must be the guy that will tell you not to buy a boat, not to just make you choose whatever boat is there just to make a nice commission. And because, of course, I don't have the experience of the other two gentlemen, but from my small experience, I have realized that finding such a broker is a difficult task. And if you find such a broker, you must keep him and do all your deals through that broker. You will see that there are not many brokers that will tell you, don't do this, don't buy it, it's not a good boat, let's wait, let's find something else. Most brokers, there are always exceptions, most brokers will tell you, yes, you like it, let's make an offer, let's try and buy it, let's go and see it. Very few brokers will have the guts to tell you, no, I've heard it's not a good boat, it has a bad history, it's too expensive, let's leave it. So if you have such a broker or you meet such a broker, you need to keep such a broker. And now going to your second.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, going to your second question, obviously how you want to use the boat is very, very important on what boat you're going to look to buy. Me personally, I don't charter my boats. I normally use them for cruising the Aegean Sea. So we need boats that are versatile, that are relatively small, that can moor in small bays. And that's why for the Greek cruising experience, the Fed ship, the 47 meter, is much better than the Benetti, at least from my experience.
I think that's you're quite right in saying that, but I think just to come back to the broker again, I think if you have a broker that you have confidence in, he certainly understands because you make it clear to him. If you buy the boat and it turns out the boat is a lot of trouble, or you don't enjoy the boat or like the boat, you're going to blame 100% your broker, and you will never do any business with him again. So with the small handful of brokers that I deal with, they're always very, very careful not to over enthuse or misguide me, because that will be the last time that I will deal with them. So I think it's a question of finding the right broker and striking a relationship. And you're quite right, that's not easy. There are more brokers that you might not want to deal with than there are good, honest, loyal, very knowledgeable brokers. And that's why it is, as Irvin said, very good, whether it's a new boat or a second-hand boat, to take some advice from other owners and talk to other owners who've had experiences, because they can certainly help you if you're new to the market.
Thank you, Peter. I would agree with you 100%, but do not forget, most new super yacht owners or wannabe owners do not have your experience. So sometimes they get exploited by the brokers.
That's why they should call you or Irvin and get some advice.
Yes, free advice, guys, no problem.
Happy anytime.
Irvin, over the years,
absolutely.
Do you wish you had met a few more brokers who had told you no, or if you people who advised you no on certain purchases? Would that have helped you over the years?
I'm sorry, Stuart, is that me or Peter?
You, Irvin. You've bought and sold a lot of boats in your career. I was just wondering if you had a broker at your side saying no occasionally, that might have helped.
There are definitely boats that I have bought that I have regretted. But mind you, that's at least half my fault as well. Maybe more than half my fault. Yes, I think that in some cases a broker should have steered me away from the purchase, because they knew that I would buy something else instead, and just say, well, that looks like good value, but I can't advise you to go with that yard. And a broker rarely says that. Yes, there are ones that, as Peter says, that you get close to, they know you're going to do business with them for a long time, and they will advise you not to buy a boat. But finding that is not an easy. It takes time to build that sort of relationship up. Yeah,
of course it does.
I've been very lucky in all the boats that I've owned. I've never regretted a single one of them. I've enjoyed them all in the way that I thought and hoped I would enjoy them. And I think of them all fondly, looking back over many years. So I think I've been very lucky. Obviously, to some degree, that's been based on the assistance and good advice of certain brokers, of certain naval architects, and other people that I consider knowledgeable. But again, as I think one of my colleagues just mentioned, it's much harder if you're a first entry into the market, which is why you would be well advised before you did anything other than have a desire to own your first yacht, to try to talk to one or two owners who perhaps have had boats or do have boats that you would think is the kind of boat you might like to have. There's no substitute in this business for experience and knowledge gained over many years. Don't do it on your own.
But I would add that I think most owners are very happy to share their knowledge of not only yards, but also of brokers, and say, this is a broker that I'm very happy to deal with, that I feel real confidence in. And I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question, but I would be very happy to share my knowledge and my recommendations. And they should talk to others as well and get their recommendations on brokers as well as shipyards and designers.
The first-time buyers thing's fascinating to me, because if you are a first-time buyer in this market, it can be a bewildering experience. Lots of boats for sale, lots of different brokerage companies. So, what would be your counsel, Irvin? Why don't we go to you first? What would be your counsel to a young owner going into the super yacht market for the first time? Obviously, talk to as many people as you possibly can. Is there any other nuggets you could offer?
Absolutely. Charter first. And try to charter, if you're interested in a boat, try to charter that boat if it's available for charter. And even if it's not for sale, you'll be surprised if at the end of a charter and you make an offer, how many boats are actually for sale but not on the market. It will also tell you if that's the right size for you, if that's the right type of boat, displacement versus speed, many other things, range, size to get into bays, as Harry so rightly says. And so I would say, don't rush into it. Charter a number of different boats of different sizes, of different types, of different yards, and you'll come out there with the knowledge, and you'll have had a great time, and you will have got your knowledge very cheaply.
And would you steer someone away from a new build?
I think you are better going into a second-hand buy initially before you think about a new build. A new build takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. You'll only get out of it the boat you want if you have got experience. And I know the last boat that I built, I could never have built it without building, let's say, 4 other super yachts. And
no, that's fascinating.
I think
so Peter, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with everything Irvin just said. I think also a new entry into the market, whether it's a new build or a second-hand boat, and I think it's very wise to buy a second-hand boat first and/or charter similar types of boats to what you're thinking about. But I think also you want to thoroughly understand the cost of the boat. By that I mean not the price you're going to pay, but the cost of running a boat. It seems to me, in my experience, for whatever reason, it always ends up costing more than you think. And you also need to understand that apart from the many, many pleasures you have from a boat, there are also frustrations. It's a bit like owning a small hotel or a restaurant. The crew can be wonderful, or they can seriously irritate you and spoil your enjoyment. So you need to understand these things. It's not just about buying the boat and that's the end of it. You've got to be prepared for the operating maintenance costs of the boat, and you've got to appreciate the frustrations of operating it, because in its own way, it's a complex business in a very small space, and the crew for the boat are absolutely vital. And I don't know many owners who haven't experienced various levels of frustration with the actual operating of a boat and the crew. And it can run from the captain down to the stewards and stewardesses or the deckhands. So there's nothing worse than planning your holiday, inviting your family or some friends to come on a 2-week cruise with you, and one day into the cruise, the bloody boat's not working. There's something wrong with the boat, and you happen to be somewhere where the spare parts aren't readily available. And these kind of things can happen even on a relatively new boat, let alone an old boat. So I think you need to fully understand the ongoing involvement that you inevitably have having a yacht. Some people solve it by having a sort of manager of their yachting activities. And that again is a bit like running a hotel. I own a number of hotels, and even though I have good management, it's always an ongoing level of frustration that sort of comes with the territory. So I think you need to appreciate that when you buy a boat of any type.
Harry, did you charter any of your boats before buying them, or similar boats, to get the feeling of that kind of boat?
No, I don't know if I did right or wrong, but I've never chartered a boat. I've never chartered a boat, and I've never chartered a boat of mine. So basically, because as you know, Stewart, my family and kids spend at least 3 to 4 months on board non-stop. I repeat, non-stop. Firstly, I didn't really have time to charter my boat out. And secondly, I didn't feel right giving the boat to other people to use when I put my family and kids on board. So, as I said, maybe it's a wrong idea, but this is what I've been doing with all my boats. I wanted to add to what Peter said, which I agree. For a newcomer, it's quite difficult. He sees so many boats for sale, new, used, known yards, unknown yards, different kinds of materials. Even if he goes ahead, then the crew is another headache. To find and employ a good crew that will not create trouble when you are indeed cruising, and you're paying so much money to buy the boat, to maintain the boat all year, just to use it for maybe a month and a half. Most owners use it for that much. And imagine you using it for 1 month a year and you have trouble with your crew. And on top of that, you have also engine troubles or air conditioning troubles or communication problems. So it's quite a difficult hobby, and a very expensive hobby. And so newcomers must be really, really careful and take really good advice from owners, from brokers, from lawyers before making the move, I would think.
But it wouldn't be a bad idea, would it, to charter the boat, or charter a boat similar to the one you're looking to purchase, or even the one you're looking to purchase, to give you a flavour and an idea of what the costs might be?
Yes, if it was somebody that didn't have a boat or didn't have a number of boats like I do, I would suggest it without thinking twice. To charter a boat, if you cannot charter the actual boat you want to buy, charter a sister, if there's a sister out there, and see if it works for you. But because the boats I bought, at least I've seen their sister ships, and I've been on board them, and some friends of mine own sister boats, I knew, let's say, what I was going into without having to charter a boat.
Okay, thank you, Harry.
I think the other thing which is very important is to, if you're new to the market, is to make sure that you do charter a boat or go on a friend's boat with your wife, because you may like the idea of a boat, but till your wife experiences living on a yacht, being on a yacht, she may hate it. She may get violently seasick. She may be irritated by having all these crew in close quarters to her, solidly for a 2-week trip or whatever it is. So I think you really have to include the wife at the outset. Otherwise, it can become a problem after you bought the boat. It's not making her smile.
Irvin, you named your boats after your wife, so is that?
I know we're on the fourth Lady Christine now, and when we talked about a new boat at some point, I said, "Well, how about a change of name?" And my wife said, "Well, sure, it's a great idea, but you've got to change your wife first."
We know who's the boss.
Harry, in your boat purchases, has Emily played a big part in the boats you've chosen?
The first 2 boats, I wasn't married, so the answer is no. The Southern Cross, we saw it and went on the sea trials together, and on the Benetti, we saw it together. We were on the sea trials together, but I never told her I bought her, and I brought it outside our house, and she just saw the boat in front of her without her knowing that I had already bought it.
Well, a bit of a surprise, I suppose. That's not too bad.
Yes, she thought the guy just brought the boat in front of her house, just because he wanted to be in an island. She didn't understand that we bought the boat and she just delivered in Greece, basically. So it was a nice surprise, yes.
Great surprise. Thank you, Harry. I'm just very aware of the time. Before we go into some questions, maybe we could summarize it. So when you're looking to buy a super yacht, human intelligence is key. Being on scene, touring the shipyard, developing a relationship, or getting to know the boat is key. And make sure your wife is on board with the purchase. Or if she's not on board, give it to her for a birthday. That might be fair. Right. We're going to go to some questions now, gents. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. The top question. Once your boat is floating, what do you look for in a harbour or marina before you decide where to dock your boat or buy a berth? Peter, why don't we start with you?
Well, personally, I would probably never buy a berth, just because there are so many wonderful places to put a boat. Perhaps take a lease on a berth. So I've never bought a berth, but I think you've got to be sure that the shoreside activities, access to where you're keeping your boat, how easy is it to fly in and out, to visit your boat? Is that going to be a hassle or not? The transportation of getting to and from the boat. Do you like everything that's happening on the shore, the restaurant, the shops? If you've got a family, you've got to think of that in the context of the wider family. You might have grandchildren or young children. You've sort of got to think about the whole thing from an entertainment lifestyle point of view, off the boat as much as on the boat. So I think it's important that you think of these things before you choose where you're going to put your boat.
Irvin, would you agree?
I would second everything that Peter said. I've never bought a berth, and I never would buy a berth. It's very hard to buy a berth, probably in places that you would actually like to have a berth. So, and in the case of France, it's a limited lease that you buy, so it's a depreciating asset. I see no reason to buy a berth, because at some point you may want it in the Balearics and export in Greece or in different parts of the world. We've used Barcelona a lot for winter, and it's been very satisfactory. But it's now going to go around the world again, and we won't need a berth next winter. So yes, of course we could have lease out any berth you own, but I would advise against it.
Harry?
In Greece, there is no option to buy berths. You can only pay a monthly rent for them. So I've never bought a berth either, and I've been renting berths for both my yachts.
Thank you all. Next question. Boat shows have traditionally been a major route to purchase. Do you think boat shows will remain a main path to buying and selling in the post-coronavirus world? Well, it's a tricky one. Harry, you're famously you tour a lot of boat shows. What do you think?
I'm quite a visual and physical guy, so it's not easy for me to go and buy a boat through a 3D virtual tour or a video or anything like that. So I hope we don't have a second or third wave of this pandemic, and I hope that the actual yacht shows come back, and yes, people continue to do what they've been doing and try and visit as many boats as they can, so they can compare and offer on their selected yachts.
Fair enough. Irvin, can anything replace boat shows?
Well, as somebody that owned Monaco Yacht Show for 10 years and built it up from a minuscule show to the show that it is today, I obviously am in favor of yacht shows. I love them. And they're a great place to go and see boats and see a lot of boats and compare boats, but they're a terrible place to buy a boat at. You should go there, but then get away, because there is such enthusiasm at a boat show, and the temptation is to say, "Oh, I'll buy that boat," and you've got to resist that. You've got to go away and think about it. But go there, yes, absolutely.
So, Peter, a great place to see boats, but a terrible place to buy boats. Is that something you'd agree with?
Well, I totally agree with it. I think you can be overreactive emotionally at a boat show, get carried away with the euphoria and the fun of going to a boat show. I agree with Irvin. Boat shows are great places to go to, but you may lose your total logic and reasoning when you're at a boat show and become an impulse buyer. So you also have the pressure of people in front of you and behind you wanting to look at the boat. They sort of schedule you in and say, come at 3 o'clock this afternoon and see the boat. And you feel undue pressure. You don't want to be in any hurry when you look at a boat. When I'm thinking of buying a boat, I look at it. If I think I like it, if that boat turns me on initially, and I think I might consider it seriously and want to do due diligence on it, then I want to sit on the boat for an hour or two. I want a glass of wine. I want to smoke a cigar. I want to go and lie on the bed, and I want to really feel the boat. I don't want to get rushed into anything or pressurized or be under time constraints. And perhaps I need to be in a little calmer frame of mind when I'm thinking of buying a boat. So I personally would not want to allow myself to buy a boat under the influence of enjoying a boat show. I would rather do it in a much quieter, more discreet manner. But I think boat shows give people a huge amount of satisfaction and pleasure. I think they're absolutely great. And I'm sure they will continue after this pandemic. And I'm equally confident that just as many people will be buying boats after this virus is all over as they were before. Generally speaking, there are too many boats on the market. That is a fact, I think. There's probably a lot more boats on the market than there are necessarily buyers at any given time. So you've got lots of choice, and you don't have to be in a hurry. And the price is always, especially on secondhand boats, highly negotiable.
Thank you. Next question. So most European and US brokers seem disinterested in considering and proposing custom Australian or New Zealand superyacht new build option to their clients due to the distance from Europe or the US. Do you feel experienced buyers such as yourselves, can you see past this bias, and would you ever consider building or buying in locations such as Australia or New Zealand? Irvin.
New Zealand used to have a fantastic reputation for building super yacht sailing boats with Alloy and Fitzroy. I don't believe either of those yards are in existence anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stewart. And so there really is, and also, of course, the prices in New Zealand skyrocketed, so that really put them out of business. Going back to what I was saying earlier, which is involvement is incredibly important and will return you many times the amount of effort that you put into it. It's very, very difficult to be heavily involved in a build in Australia and New Zealand if you're living in the States or in Europe. I would never even think about it. I want to get to the yard regularly. I want to talk to my designers regularly. And that becomes more and more difficult the further away it is. I think it's great for Australians and New Zealanders to build locally, but not for me.
You are very hands-on in the process of building your boat, so logistically it would be tricky, I understand. Peter, what about you? Would you consider Australian or New Zealand yard when building a boat?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't consider building a boat anywhere that wasn't reasonably on the same time scale as where I live. So if there's a 1 or 2 hour time difference, that's fine. If it's more than that, it becomes inconvenient, obviously. If traveling to and from the yard, as Irvin says, is difficult and time consuming, I wouldn't consider that. It doesn't add to the pleasure. It detracts from the pleasure. So personally, I think it's important if you're going to build a boat or indeed refit or maintain a second-hand boat, that you choose a yard that is convenient and suitable for you to visit on a regular basis and talk to on more or less your time scale. So for me, it's a clear-cut decision.
Fair enough. We've got perhaps time for just one more. There's one question here about how much impact do videos, virtual tours, and live walkthroughs of boats have on the decision-making process. And I think we might have covered that already. I mean, I think for all three of you, all aligned that nothing will ever replace being on the boat. But Harry, I mean, for your next super yacht purchase, how much sway would a virtual tour or 3D video or 3D tour or walkthrough or anything like that have in your decision making? Can it ever replace or inform your decision?
I don't think it can replace, but I think it's much better than a pack of photographs.
Yeah.
So it can help, and it's very useful, and people use it, and it gives you a good idea of the boat, but it cannot replace walking the actual boat.
Can I just say, Stuart, I entirely agree with Harry. What I think it's most useful for is eliminating boats, because you can't have the time to go around every boat, even in the size range that you want to look at. And it's a quick way of eliminating boats, but it should never be used as the buying part of the boat.
And perhaps we'll just end on this one. So how do owners ensure transparency during the entire purchase, build, sale process? And is there any talk of integrating digitized smart contracts using blockchain? Would anyone like to field that one? Perhaps we can leave blockchain out and just leave the question as, how do owners ensure transparency during the buying process? Peter.
With great difficulty, I think. I think all the things we've said earlier on are very important in ensuring transparency. But at the end of the day, it does boil down to trust. You can have the best lawyers, you can have the best advisors, you can put together what you believe is the best team to help you make your commitment. But fundamentally, you have to look these people you're relying upon in the eye. There's an element of gut feeling. Is there an emotional relationship, of similarity between you and the people that are going to be taking your money? It's a judgment call. Finally, you will never be certain that you're going to have total transparency, because things go wrong, as Irvin said before, in building yachts. And are the yard going to put their hand up and own up to a mistake, or are they going to put their head in the sand, or are they going to try to camouflage and cover the mistake? These are very important things when you're buying a yacht. So a lot of it boils down to just the relationship between you and the people that you're going to rely on, who at the end of the day are taking your money to perform the service you expect them to perform.
Thank you. Harry, did you want something? Did you want to add to that?
It's very difficult to be completely transparent, and the lack of experience and the lack of knowing your broker well, and actually the lack of knowing the seller, because in most times you don't know the seller, leads to increased lack of transparency. So I don't know how easily that can be fixed and improved. Obviously, if you've bought and sold 30 or 40 yachts, obviously you have a much better understanding of what's going on and eliminate gray areas. But for the newcomers, it's actually quite a risk.
Indeed. We've gone way over time, so I'm sorry, everybody, for taking up a bit more time than was scheduled, but we appreciate you sticking around. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I'd like to thank Irvin Laidlaw, Peter de Savary, and Harry Vafias for your time. Harry, I'm glad you made it. Thank you. And Irvin and Peter. I'm glad there were no technical hiccups during that. It all went rather flawlessly, so very pleased. And also thank you everyone for watching. It's been a great session, and like we said at the top of this webinar, there'll be a lot more coming, so keep an eye out for that. Please feedback. The more we hear from you, the more we can improve these sessions. That feedback loop is really key. My email address was in a slide at the beginning, so please drop me a line, or events@boatinternationalmedia.com. And I hope you'll all join us again for part 2 of the owners series, where we'll talk about super yacht charter with some super yacht owners with a lot of experience in that area. That's it from me, ladies and gents. So on behalf of our guests today and everyone at Boat International, thank you very much for watching and taking part. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.